Hey guys, tonight we dive into something that might seem arcane and distant at first, but trust me, it's deeply fascinating. We're exploring ancient Egyptian temple ceremonies. Yes, you heard that right. Forget the Hollywood mummies and treasure-filled tombs for a moment. We're going to peek behind the curtain of ancient Egypt's sacred temples, all the way into the secret rituals and everyday routines that rarely make the history textbooks. What really went on deep inside those towering temple walls at the break of dawn? How did priests wake up a god each morning behind closed doors? Did ordinary Egyptians ever get to witness these mysterious ceremonies? Or were they forever shut out? And what surprising lengths did those priests go to in order to keep the favor of the gods day after day? Brace yourself for some eye-opening and incense-filled details. This won't be a glamorous tale, but it will be fascinating. Before we jump into the past, take a moment to get comfortable. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a gentle fan or some soft background sound. And if you enjoy these late-night history dives, consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It really helps me continue these journeys. Feel free to let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing the global community gathered for these stories. Now take a deep breath and relax. Let's ease into tonight's journey together, back to ancient Egypt, and uncover the untold details of ancient Egyptian temple ceremonies. Picture this scene. The sky above is still dark, a deep blue velvet sprinkled with stars, and the air over the Egyptian city of Thebes is cool and quiet. It's early morning, well before sunrise, and the mighty Nile River nearby flows silently under the faint light of a waning moon. You stand at the massive gates of a temple, the temple of Amun, its high mud brick walls and towering stone pylons looming against the night sky. There is a hush over the city and the temple complex, a sense of expectation in the pre-dawn stillness. The only sounds are the soft rustling of palm trees in a gentle breeze and the distant bray of a donkey waking in the town. Even the insects and night birds seem to pause, as if aware that something sacred is about to unfold. Inside the temple's outer courtyard, braziers flicker with a few orange flames, casting dancing shadows on the carved walls. These walls are covered in scenes of pharaohs and gods, but right now, in the dim light, they feel like silent guardians watching over the darkness. The smell of cool stone and a lingering hint of incense from the previous night hangs in the air. You take a slow breath. The scent is earthy and sweet, perhaps frankincense or myrrh clinging to the walls from countless rituals before dawn. All around, the temple lies in near silence, save for those small points of fire and the distant glow of stars overhead. Within this darkness, however, people are beginning to stir, preparing for a very important ritual that will greet the new day. Imagine yourself walking quietly across the temple's great open court. The paving stones under your sandals are smooth and still damp with the night's cool. Ahead of you, beyond the open court, stands the first pair of immense pylons. Tall trapezoidal gateways decorated with faded paint and hieroglyphs. Through their open portal lies another courtyard, and further within, more pylons leading ever deeper into the temple. Each gateway you pass through takes you into a more sacred space. As you go further in, the ceilings will lower, the halls will darken, and the air will grow stiller. The temple is designed this way deliberately. Every step inward is like moving back to the moment of creation. The outer court is bright and expansive like the everyday world, but deeper inside, the environment becomes increasingly sacred and mysterious. The massive columns ahead are carved and painted to resemble lotus blossoms and papyrus plants, as if you are entering the marsh of primordial creation itself. The floor very subtly rises under your feet as you walk further, symbolizing the mound of earth that first emerged from the waters at the dawn of time. If you look up at the stone ceiling when you reach a shaded hall, you might discern faint golden stars painted on a deep blue background, evoking the night sky above. Here, the sky isn't just above you, it is enveloping you within the temple. But for now, you are under the open sky in the broad outer court, where even common people might sometimes stand during festivals. This morning, however, the space is nearly empty and hushed. As you move inward, you notice a few figures in the gloom, temple priests beginning their day. They are ghostly shapes in white linen robes, moving with practiced quietness by the light of small oil lamps. One priest walks past carrying a little clay lamp that casts a warm golden glow on the stone columns as he goes. The flame lights his face from below, revealing calm, focused features and a smoothly shaven head. All the priests here have shaved heads. In fact, they've removed every strand of hair from their heads and bodies. In the dim light, one priest's scalp has a faint sheen of water from a recent wash. This extreme cleanliness isn't just for comfort in the heat, it's a sacred requirement. To enter the presence of a god, they believe, one must be purged of impurities, and that includes body hair and any dirt of the outside world. Some priests even remove their eyebrows and eyelashes as part of their ritual grooming, all to ensure absolute purity. Every detail of their appearance has been considered. They wear simple white linen garments, freshly laundered, because white symbolizes purity, and linen, made from flax, was considered ritually clean. You won't find any wool or leather on them within these holy precincts. Those materials are from animals and could carry pollution. Their feet are bare or clad in thin papyrus sandals, as they'll soon tread on sacred ground and dare not bring any dust or unclean soil from outside. The result is that the priests move almost silently, their footsteps soft on stone, their white robes ghost-like in the gloom, and their presence as discreet as the whisper of the morning breeze. Now, watch as one of these priests, a middle-aged man with a quiet air of authority, heads toward a dark, reflective pool on the temple grounds. This is the sacred lake of the temple, a broad rectangular basin of water that lies still and black in the pre-dawn dimness. By day, the lake would shimmer with sunlight and reflect the temple walls, but right now, it looks like a slice of night itself set into the ground. The priest pauses at the edge of the water. Under the faint light of the fading stars, he slips off his white robe, folding it neatly and placing it on a stone bench. Clad only in a white loincloth, he steps down a short flight of stone stairs into the lake. The water receives him with gentle ripples. He wades in waist deep, and you can imagine the cold shock of that water against his skin. It must make him inhale sharply, but he shows no sign of discomfort. In the silence, you might hear the droplets trickling off his arms and the slight splash echoing as he cups water in his hands. He begins to wash himself methodically, murmuring prayers that you can barely hear. With each splash of water, he washes away not just the dust of the night, but symbolically any impurity of spirit. This isn't a quick dip. He is performing a sacred cleansing called UBS, a ritual bath. He rinses his arms, his face, shaves any overnight stubble with a careful stroke of a razor, and even cleans under his fingernails. Every part of him must be pure. The cold water in the pre-dawn darkness is bracing, but it also focuses the mind. As he stands chest deep in the pool, eyes closed, he might be meditating on the task ahead, or offering a silent plea for worthiness to serve the god. Overhead, the stars are beginning to fade, and a subtle gray light is touching the eastern horizon. The first hint of dawn is reflecting in the sacred lake's surface around the priest. In Egyptian belief, before the sun god rises, the world is in a state similar to that primordial darkness before creation. Here is a man standing in cool, sacred waters, in near darkness, waiting for the first light. It is as if he is participating in the recreation of the world that happens every dawn. He might briefly think of the mythic first sunrise, how the lotus flower opened on the waters of chaos, and the sun god emerged. For him and his fellow priests, their morning ritual will help that sun god rise again and ensure that life continues as it should. The priest finishes his ablutions and steps out of the sacred lake with water streaming off his body. A younger attendant hands him a clean linen cloth to dry himself. In the dim light, you notice the priest take a pinch of a white crystalline substance from a small jar. It is natron, a natural salt. He places a bit in his mouth, swishing it around and gargling briefly before spitting it out onto the earth. Even his mouth and breath must be purified. The words he speaks to the god should be as clean as the dawn air. Now, cleansed, shaved, and wrapped again in a fresh linen robe, the priest is ready for the day's central ritual. By now, a subtle pale glow has appeared on the eastern horizon. Other priests have also completed their purifications and gather quietly near the temple's heart. There is a stirring of purposeful movement in the half-light. The high priest, the man who performed the lake ritual, now leads a small procession of clergy into an inner chamber near the sanctuary. This chamber is still shadowy. Only the faintest gray light from outside peeks in, but the priests carry lamps and a small brazier filled with charcoal. They arrange themselves in practiced positions, each knowing exactly where to stand and what to do. One priest, acting as a lector, a reader of sacred texts, softly recites the first incantations of the morning, his voice barely above a whisper as it echoes off the stone walls. Another priest kneels to strike flint and ignite the charcoal in the brazier. After a few attempts, a spark catches and a tiny flame comes to life, flickering and then growing. He feeds it with a bit of dry kindling, and soon the brazier's fire glows steadily, illuminating the faces of the priests who stand encircling it. In that enclosed space, the firelight dances in their eyes as they watch the flames. This simple fire carries immense symbolic weight. It represents the first light of the morning, the rebirth of the sun. By kindling this flame, they are ritually helping the sun god to be reborn. A tendril of smoke rises as the charcoal burns hotter. One of the priests takes a golden spoon-like censer and sprinkles a few grains of fragrant incense onto the fire. Instantly, the brazier crackles and a sweet, citrusy, resinous aroma fills the chamber. It is frankincense, the sacred incense for the dawn. The smoke coils upward, and the priests inhale its scent deeply, knowing that this smoke is pleasing to the gods and will carry their prayers with it. They might quietly intone a hymn as the smoke billows, perhaps a gentle chant to Ra, the sun, or to Amun Ra, the great god of this temple, acknowledging the coming of the light. The flickering orange glow and the rich scent create a cocoon of sanctity in the gloom. Outside, the sky grows lighter by the minute. It is nearly time. The high priest now takes a final item from an attendant, a small figurine of Ma'at, the goddess who personifies what is right, truth and cosmic order, or perhaps just a single ostrich feather symbolizing her. Holding this symbol of Ma'at close to his heart, He steps toward the innermost sanctuary doors, which remain closed and sealed since the previous evening. You follow silently, imagining the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Before him stand the doors to the Holy of Holies, the most sacred space in the temple where the god's image resides. These doors are not large, perhaps human-sized, made of heavy cedar wood plated with gold and adorned with images of protective deities. But they are immensely important. A sturdy cord binds the double doors shut, and over the knot of that cord is a clay seal that was pressed with the high priest's signet yesterday evening. This seal assures that no one has entered the sanctuary during the night. It is the priest's duty now to break that seal and awaken the god for the day. The moment has come. In the stillness, the high priest raises his voice, chanting a formulaic prayer to announce his presence as a servant of the deity. The other priests stand behind him in a semicircle, some carrying offerings wrapped in linen, some holding musical instruments or additional incense, all watching reverently. The lector priest softly prompts the lines of the ritual as needed, but the high priest knows them by heart. He takes a special instrument, perhaps a small knife or a decorative bronze tool, and carefully cuts the cord, cracking the clay seal. The snap of the seal breaking is loud in the quiet room. Next, with deliberate, respectful motions, he unties the now cut cord and removes it. Finally, he grasps the door bolts. There's a brief pause, a silence in which everyone present seems to hold their breath. Then, with a slow, steady push, he slides the bolt aside, an act sometimes called drawing the bolt in the ritual texts, and gently opens the heavy doors. A soft gust of cool, aromatic air wafts out from the darkness within, carrying the faint fragrance of yesterday's incense. The inner sanctuary is revealed, a small, enclosed chamber, utterly dark except for the light the priests bring with them. Initially, one sees only blackness beyond the threshold. The high priest steps inside, holding a lamp aloft in one hand and the symbol of Ma'at in the other. You peer in from behind him, and gradually details emerge in the lamplight. The room is close-walled and intimate, with ceilings lower than the halls outside. The walls are adorned with exquisite reliefs and perhaps gilded panels, and they glint faintly as the lamplight moves. In the center of the sanctuary, upon a pedestal that itself rests on a low dais, stands the object of all this devotion, the cult statue of the god. At this temple, the deity is Amun-Ra, king of the gods. The statue is not enormous like the colossi you might see in outer courts, but a modest-sized effigy, perhaps a few feet tall. It is crafted of precious materials, carved from wood and entirely gilded in shining gold, or cast from solid bronze and inlaid with lapis lazuli and other stones. The figure likely shows Amun in a standing posture, wearing his tall, twin-plumed crown and holding symbolic scepters. For a moment in the flicker of the lamp, the statue's face is in shadow, but as the priest draws closer, the gentle light catches on the god's visage. Golden cheeks and coal-outlined eyes painted on the statue begin to glow into view. The eyes, inlaid with obsidian and white quartz, seem almost alive when illuminated. They gaze forward inscrutably. The entire form of the idol, with its rich adornments, slowly emerges from the darkness, like a being coming forth from the void at the beginning of time. For a heartbeat, the high priest and the statue are face to face in silence. This is the most sacred moment of dawn. The god, in effigy, still slumbers, and the high priest has entered like a respectful attendant to a sleeping monarch. The high priest places the Ma'at emblem he carried on a small altar or stand as an offering, symbolically presenting truth and order at the god's feet. Then he lowers himself to the ground in reverence. He stretches out full length on his stomach before the statue, kissing the floor in a gesture of complete devotion. Behind him, at the threshold, you see the other priests also bowing deeply, some on their knees, with foreheads touching the floor. After a long moment, the high priest rises slightly to assume a kneeling position and raises both arms high in a posture of praise and worship. His voice, steady and filled with devotion, breaks the quiet as he intones the morning greeting. Awaken in peace, great God, awaken in peace. The words echo softly in the tiny chamber. He continues, invoking Amun-Ra by name. Awaken in peace, Amun-Ra, Lord of the thrones of the two lands. May your face shine upon your servants. These may not be the exact words recorded on papyrus, but they capture the essence of what has been said in this space every morning for generations. As he speaks, it is as if he is gently nudging a loved one from sleep. But that loved one is a powerful deity upon whom the fate of the world rests each day. There is a pause after the hymn. The air feels charged, expectant. In the mythology of this ritual, by uttering these words, the priest is helping to reanimate the god's spirit in the statue, allowing the divine presence, which may have been absent or at rest during the night, to return with the dawn. Another priest now steps forward slightly, holding a fan made of ostrich feathers. He waves it softly, causing a light breeze to stir within the sanctuary. This is both practical, refreshing the air, and symbolic, representing the cool morning wind at sunrise, or the breath of life gently awakening the deity. Another attendant priest gently shakes a sistrum, a sacred rattle instrument, producing a soft jangling sound that resonates like the earliest morning birds or the rustling of papyrus reeds by the river. These delicate sounds and motions help create an atmosphere of awakening and are thought to please the senses of the god. In this tender moment, the boundary between statue and living deity blurs in the minds of the priests. They treat the statue wholly as a living presence. Now the practical service to the deity begins. The high priest and his assistants move to remove any items on the statue that signify yesterday's state. Just as a person upon waking might change out of sleepwear or wash their face, the god's statue will be cleaned and reclothed anew. With careful hands, an assistant priest reaches up and removes the gold and jeweled ornaments adorning the god's figure. They lift off a broad collar necklace inlaid with turquoise and carnelian. They slip off any rings or bracelets that were placed on the statue's limbs and set aside the miniature crook or flail it might be holding. Each item is placed on a clean linen cloth on a side table for later safekeeping and ritual purification. The statue now stands unadorned except for its basic form and any permanent adornment that's part of it. Working in unison and silence, the priests then begin the cleansing. One priest brings forward a shallow basin of pure water mixed with natron, the same cleansing salt the priest used earlier on himself, and perhaps crushed lotus petals or other fragrant elements. The high priest dips a fresh linen cloth into this holy water. Starting at the crown of the statue's head and working downward, he gently washes the god's face and form. He wipes away any dust that might have settled, symbolically washing away any ill influences. As he does so, he recites softly, "I cleanse your body, O Divine One, removing all impurities as the sun dispels the darkness." Another priest may follow, drying the statue with another fine cloth. After the water purification, the high priest opens a small alabaster jar of sacred oil. This oil is rich with aromatic spices. You catch the scent of something like frankincense mixed with myrrh and a hint of cinnamon or sweet balms. He dabs his fingers in the oil and anoints the statue, touching the brow, the shoulders, the heart area, and the feet of the idol. As he anoints, he murmurs blessings. I anoint your body with the oil of rejuvenation, that you may shine in health and vigor. The golden surface of the statue glistens even more as a thin sheen of oil is applied, giving it a warm, lifelike luster in the lamplight. For the priests, this step is not merely to polish the statue. It is feeding the god's skin, much like applying lotion, and it imbues the figure with the essence of sacred perfumes, which are pleasing to the god's senses. Now comes the dressing. Another priest has unfolded several pieces of new linen cloth. These linens are exquisite, bleached to a pure white and ironed smooth, in ancient fashion, probably beaten or pressed by polished stones to eliminate wrinkles. The lengths of fabric are offered to the high priest one by one. He takes the first piece, perhaps a short skirt-like kilt of linen, and wraps it carefully around the statue's lower body if the figure is standing, tying it off with tiny cords in a neat, dignified manner. The next piece might be a drape that goes over one shoulder, crossing the chest, giving the idol a sort of divine outfit that resembles the ceremonial attire seen in temple reliefs. In some traditions, as each piece of clothing is presented, the priest might declare, "We clothe you in the garment of light," or "Receive the cloth of purity," signifying the symbolism of the attire beyond just cloth. They add multiple layers. Ancient temple records mention up to 4 or even more different garments, each with names like royal linen or festival cloth, each representing aspects of protection and honor. Layer by layer, the god is re-robed. The final piece might be a splendid cloak or an additional sash that completes the ensemble. Once the linens are in place, the priests return the jewelry and insignia of power to the statue. The broad collar is gently placed back around the neck, shimmering against the fresh white linen. They slide on any bracelets or armbands, ensuring they sit just right. The small scepters or symbols, perhaps an ankh, the sign of life, or a miniature mace signifying power, are placed back into the statue's hands. Lastly, the high priest lifts the tall crown, the twin plumes of Amun crafted in wood and gold, and sets it atop the statue's head, fixing it securely. Now the image of Amun-Ra is magnificent again, cleansed, anointed, dressed in radiant white, and adorned with gold and jewels. In the torchlight, the figure glows, and the painted eyes seem to gaze forward with renewed vitality. It appears awake, aware, and majestic. You might catch yourself feeling a sense of presence in this dim, sacred space, with the fragrant oils and incense in the air and the ritual chants still echoing in your mind. It truly feels as though Amun-Ra has entered his statue and is looking upon the world through those stone and crystal eyes. The last touch in this morning toilette is subtle but significant. Cosmetics. Just as noble Egyptians would outline their eyes with kohl each morning, the god too receives this attention. The high priest takes a tiny applicator stick from a palette. He touches it to a small jar of black kohl powder, ground galena, and carefully applies a fresh line of this eyeliner to the statue's eyelids, redefining the dramatic almond outline of the eyes. A second pigment, a green malachite paste, is gently brushed onto the lower lid area, adding a hint of color. The priests believe these cosmetic touches are protective as well as decorative. The kohl prevents any malign influence, and practically on people, it helps against the sun's glare. As the finishing act, they polish the statue's face with a soft cloth, bringing out a final shine on the gold. Now, standing back, they see the god's image in all its glory, eyes bright and outlined, body gleaming, garments pure and dignified. It appears lively and regal. You might imagine, for a split second in the flicker of lamplight, that the statue truly did just blink or smile. Such is the lifelike presence it now exudes. With the god now attended to and reawakened, the focus turns to nourishment. It is time to present the morning offerings of food and drink. Think of this as setting the breakfast table for the divine guest of honor. Several priests have been waiting just outside the sanctuary doors with trays laden with foods prepared at first light. Upon a low alabaster offering table in front of the statue, they begin arranging a divine banquet. Picture the variety and abundance. Loaves of bread, still warm from the dawn baking, are piled in a neat stack. These come in different shapes, some rounded, some elongated, even some shaped like little hedgehogs, as was a custom, all made from the finest wheat flour. Beside them are placed small cakes, sweetened with honey and dates, their tops glazed and sprinkled with sesame. There are cuts of meat from the temple's own herds, a haunch of beef roasted and sliced, succulent goose and duck, all cooked to perfection and emitting a savory aroma. Earlier that dawn, temple butchers had slaughtered a prime bull and several fowl in a swift, sacred manner, preparing their choicest cuts for the god's table. This act, though bloody, was considered a pious duty, a giving of life to sustain the divine life. Now those meats are presented, cooked to a turn. Golden chalices or jars are filled with beer, the thick, nutritious Egyptian beer that is more like a malty porridge, and others with wine as an offering. Wine was less common but prized. For a great god like Amun, jars of deep red wine from the Nile Delta vineyards or imported from afar would not be spared. Fresh fruits are heaped in reed baskets, figs and dates, clusters of grapes, pomegranates split open to reveal ruby seeds, and maybe slices of melon. Vegetables and greens are not forgotten, bunches of scallions and crunchy lettuce. The Egyptians considered lettuce almost an aphrodisiac and sacred to certain gods, so offering it symbolized vitality, plus perhaps cucumbers and radishes. And of course, no offering would be complete without onions and garlic. Egyptians loved and revered onions, believing their concentric rings symbolized eternity. Whole onions are piled up as well, their pungency considered invigorating. One priest carefully pours a libation of cool water from a polished copper pitcher into a bowl as another priest holds the bowl. This water offering is essential. Water is life, and by giving water they give life to the god and symbolically to the land. Another priest lights a fresh stick of incense, this time perhaps a different scent, like myrrh resin, or a blend called kapet, kaipi, which is sweeter and more complex, and walks around the table, letting the smoke waft over the food, consecrating and purifying it. The combined smells of this morning ritual are extraordinary. The sweetness of incense, the fresh baked bread, the roasted meat and malted beer, the sharp green of onions, a tapestry of scents swirling in the dim sanctuary. As each category of offering is laid down, the priests announce it in formal words. Offering of bread to Amun-Ra, that he may nourish his Ka. Offering of beer to Amun-Ra, that he may rejoice. Offering of cattle and fowl, the bounty of our herds, that he may be satisfied. Offering of wine, the sweet juice of the grape, that he may delight in it. Offering of fruits and all good things, that his heart may be gladdened. Their voices intermingle in a rhythmic cadence, a litany of gifts. The high priest stands by the table and raises his hands over the spread, reciting a final blessing. May these offerings be pure, may they be pleasing. All things good and pure we set before you, O Lord of the thrones of two lands. Take them, partake of them, and renew your strength. In that belief system, the god's invisible essence will indeed absorb the spiritual nutrition of these foods. To an outside observer, it may seem like the statue simply stands inertly while the priests speak to it, but to the Egyptians, an exchange is truly happening on the unseen level. As a crowning offering, the high priest does not forget Ma'at. The principle of truth and order offered earlier in symbol is now reaffirmed. He again lifts the Ma'at figurine or feather that he had set down and holds it out over the array of food. In a clear voice he declares, "Take unto you Ma'at, O Great One. May Ma'at flourish in the two lands, all of Egypt, as you are satisfied." This is the ultimate assurance that along with the physical sustenance, the god has received the spiritual sustenance of a just and orderly world. In essence, they're saying, "We are doing right by you and keeping the world's harmony. Please continue to bless us." For a short while, a contemplative silence ensues. The priests remain in the sanctuary but step back slightly, giving what one might call room for the deity to enjoy the offerings. If you close your eyes, you can almost picture Amun-Ra not as a statue, but as an invisible presence ingesting the essence of each food, savoring the devotion behind it. The chamber is quiet, except for the soft crackle of incense and maybe the drip of a bit of libation water on the stone floor. One priest quietly hums a hymn under his breath, a gentle melody to entertain the god while he dines. Another priest might gently shake the sistrum intermittently, its jingling now so soft it could lull a baby. In some temples, a small choir of musicians, including the esteemed chantresses of Amun, female temple singers, might stand in a side chamber and offer a gentle hymn, accompanied by a harp or flute softly playing in the background. It's as if they provide soothing dinner music for the deity, their voices and instruments echoing softly through the hall. These moments are meditative and reverent. The high priest might use this time to pray inwardly for the needs of the nation, asking the god to bring forth the Nile flood in the right measure, to protect the pharaoh and the people, to let crops grow tall. All the grand hopes of the kingdom funnel into this tiny dark room in those intimate moments. Presently, it is time to conclude the service. The priests know that the ritual has been accepted. There might be a feeling of spiritual completeness, or simply the routine understanding that once the prayers are said and the incense burned down part way, the god has taken what he needs. Now the leftover food and drink, still physically untouched but now imbued with divine blessing, will revert to the mortal realm. These are called reversion offerings. With careful movements, the priests begin to remove the food items from the table. One gathers the breads back onto a tray, another covers the meat cuts, and others cap the beer and wine jars. They handle everything with respect, because these offerings, though destined for human consumption shortly, are essentially sacred gifts returned by the god. Before they depart the sanctuary, the priests perform a tidy ritual cleanup. The high priest takes a final censer of incense and circles it around the sanctuary, ensuring any lingering negative energy is dispelled and that the room remains sanctified after their presence. He then takes a vessel of pure water and sprinkles it lightly on the floor and around the altar, a symbolic rinsing and a blessing to seal the ceremony. The droplets catch the lamplight as they fall. Finally, as described earlier, he takes a broom of palm fronds. Starting from the innermost spot he stepped, he gently sweeps backward toward the door, brushing away every footprint he and others have made in the fine dust that inevitably settles on the floor. It's as though they are erasing the human presence from the god's private room, leaving no disturbance in the sanctity of that space. Their duties done, the priests step out of the sanctuary one by one. The high priest is last to leave, walking backward through the doors with a final respectful bow. The doors of the shrine are closed once more, sealing the god in his chamber. The high priest takes the fresh cord handed to him by an assistant and winds it around the door handles, tying a firm knot. He then presses a lump of wet clay onto the knot, and with his ring or a special seal stamp, impresses the clay. The new seal bears the mark of this morning's ritual completion, like the wax seal on an official letter. It will remain until the next opening, later in the day or the next dawn, assuring that the sanctum remains untouched by any impious hand. The morning rite is complete. Can you feel the difference in the temple atmosphere? Where before it was the anticipation of darkness, now the first beams of the rising sun have crept into the temple corridors, illuminating motes of incense smoke swirling in the air. The stone walls, which looked gray and somber in torchlight, now reflect a soft golden hue wherever the sunlight touches them. The reliefs of gods and kings seem to stand out proudly from the walls in this new light. Outside in the open courts, you can hear the chirping of birds and the distant lowing of cattle from the temple's own herds. Sounds of life continuing on, assured by the renewal of divine order. The priests carry the trays of offerings out with them. A couple of junior priests or temple servants will take these to the appropriate places. Much will go to the priestly quarters as the clergy's breakfast. In fact, you can imagine that as soon as they are out of the sacred areas, some of the younger priests grin at the sight of the warm bread and beer. Dawn ritual days start on an empty stomach for purity's sake, and the men are probably quite hungry by now. They will eat in a communal meal, thankful for the god's generosity, but they will also be mindful not to gorge impolitely. They treat the food with reverence. In eating these offerings, they believe they are taking in the blessing of the god's meal, a sort of sacrament that will give them strength and good health. Walking back out through the tall pillared halls, the high priest can finally relax his shoulders a little. He has fulfilled the most important obligation of the day. In his heart, he offers a silent thanks to Amun for accepting the service. Perhaps he even feels a gentle joy, a lightness of being, knowing that in this eternal cycle he has played his part to keep chaos at bay for one more day. The temple is coming alive now in the post-ritual morning. Other staff who are not involved in the inner sanctum ritual, scribes, gardeners, workers, begin their daily tasks. But for a moment, let us linger in the glow of the sanctum's aftermath. Look around the temple's main courtyard with the priests as they emerge. The sun has fully risen over the eastern hills across the Nile. Sunlight floods the open court where you stood earlier in the gloom. Now the floor's flagstones are warming, and long shadows of the pillars stretch westward. The aroma of incense still hangs on the air, mixing with the fresher scents of morning. Perhaps blooming lotus flowers in the temple's garden pond, or bread now being baked in larger quantities for the upcoming day's meals and offerings. The daily cycle of life in the temple continues, all anchored by the ritual that just concluded. On the walls, scenes depict pharaohs making offerings to the gods, scenes exactly like what the priest just enacted. In those carvings, it is often the pharaoh himself presenting ma'at, or pouring a libation, reinforcing that, in Egyptian ideology, the king should perform these duties for all Egypt. Indeed, in the reliefs, it is as if Pharaoh, and all Egypt below him, has served the god through the priest's actions. Whether priest or pharaoh, the officiant stands before the altar barefoot, so as not to defile the place with worldly dust, and raises the incense and libations in exactly the manner you witnessed. The The continuity of it all is striking, generation after generation. For hundreds of years, these morning rites have taken place here or in temples like it up and down the Nile. The high priest still holding the Mayat figurine briefly as he walks. Soon he will place it back on a pedestal until the next use, glances at those carved images. He knows the inscriptions by heart. They say things like, giving Ma'at to the god, that he may ensure the rising of the sun and the defeat of chaos. Today, those words were not just stone-carved poetry. He lived them. In a very real sense, to an Egyptian priest, he and his colleagues have collaborated with the gods to keep creation going. The hours after the grand morning ceremony pass in a more ordinary fashion. Having attended to the god, the priests now attend to their own needs. In a side chamber that serves as a refectory, a group of them gather to break their fast. They sit on low stools around reed mats, laid with some of the very bread and beer that were offered to Amun. It's a humble meal, but satisfying. Coarse barley bread that is filling and rich, and jugs of cool beer that provide both refreshment and nourishment. The priests give thanks as they eat, mindful that this food was first given to the god. They consider it a blessed sustenance, suffused with divine grace. Conversation is muted and congenial. Perhaps two younger priests quietly chuckle about a mis-stitched seam in one of the god's old garments that they noticed this morning, a light-hearted note, while an elder priest gently reminds them of the importance of maintaining absolute perfection in all temple duties. They nod respectfully, swallowing mouthfuls of bread. Outside the open door, the sunlight is growing brighter and the blue sky is fully revealed, promising a hot day ahead. Soon, each priest moves on to his daily tasks. Not everyone in the priesthood spends all day in prayer. The temple is also a workplace and a community. In the temple of Amun, many priests are also scribes and administrators, managing the temple's considerable resources. Imagine now a small office near the temple's great gate. Papyrus scrolls are spread out on a wooden desk, and a senior scribe priest with a reed pen tucked behind his ear is tallying accounts. He's recording how many loaves of bread were used in today's offering, and how many remain in the granary, how much incense was burned, and how much is left from the last shipment that arrived by boat from the land of Punt months ago. Temples in Egypt are well endowed. They own fields, herds of cattle, vineyards, and workshops, all gifted by pharaohs past to ensure the gods are perpetually provided for. Managing all this is no small task. By late morning, the scribe steps out into the sun to check on the temple granaries, massive mud brick silos within the precinct walls where grain is stored. Workers are hauling in sacks of barley from an ox-drawn cart, part of the temple's tax income from nearby villages. The scribe marks the delivery on his tablet, overseeing as laborers pour the grain into the silo, the golden cascade of kernels reflecting the sunlight. He wipes sweat from his brow. It's nearly midday now and the heat is mounting. Elsewhere, under a colonnade's shade, a group of student scribes sits cross-legged with brushes and wooden writing boards. An older priest is teaching them the intricacies of hieroglyphic script. You can hear the scratching of their pens and the gentle cadence of the teacher reciting a classic wisdom text. These youths are perhaps the sons of other priests or promising village boys dedicated to temple service. They practice drawing the symbol of the ibis for the god Thoth, patron of scribes, again and again, a fitting exercise in a temple where the very walls are covered in sacred writing. The temple is not only a place of worship, but a place of knowledge. Its library, called the House of Life, contains scrolls of prayers, medical recipes, astronomical charts, and hymns. One young priest in training, after finishing his lines, is sent to assist in that library, carefully dusting papyrus scrolls and replacing them in niches. He marvels at the titles he sees: Book of the Day and Night, Hymns of Victory of Pharaoh so-and-so, and treatises on how to interpret dreams. Around the temple's outer courts, the practical maintenance of sacred space continues steadily. One can imagine the smell of wet rushes as a pair of workers sluice the floor with water and natron to keep the dust down. Another group prunes the date palms and sycamore fig trees in the temple garden. The garden is a lush enclave with blooming lotuses and perhaps even a small menagerie of sacred animals: cats slinking in the sunny patches, tame ibises stalking around the reflecting pool, knowing they are protected creatures here. These workers are not all priests. Many are lay staff or lower-ranked wab priests, those whose main role is to keep things clean and pure. They take pride in their work. Tidying the god's house is in itself considered a pious act. In the distance, on the temple's south side, you hear a brief metallic clang. That would be the coppersmiths in the workshop area, perhaps hammering a new incense burner or repairing a ceremonial vessel. The temple has its own workshops for pottery, carpentry, and metalwork, all buzzing quietly with activity to support the continual rituals. As the sun reaches its zenith, the intense heat stills many activities. The limestone of the temple floors grows hot to the touch where it's exposed to direct sun. Most priests and workers retreat to shaded areas. The temple proper also falls into a midday lull. According to tradition, the god is now content and at peace after his morning meal, perhaps even in a state of divine contemplation or rest. Still, the Egyptians will not let the sun god Re, and by extension all gods, pass the high noon without acknowledgement. So, around the noon hour, a small delegation of priests assembles once more in the innermost part of the temple, not inside the sanctuary this time, but right outside its sealed doors. They have purified themselves again with a quick rinse and fresh clothes, though not as elaborate a preparation as at dawn. In the dim light of the temple's core, which is now illuminated by only a narrow shaft of sunlight from a high, clear-story vent, the high priest, or a deputy, lights a stick of myrrh incense. Myrrh has a more pungent, resinous fragrance than the morning's frankincense, a bittersweet perfume that befits the stark brightness and heat of midday. He places the smoking incense in a stand at the threshold of the holy sanctuary. The doors remain closed, the seal intact. There is no need to enter. This is a time to honor the deity's presence without disturbing his solitude. The priest offers a brief prayer, something like, "O Amun Ra, the sun is at its highest. May you continue to shine your light upon us. We honor you at the peak of day." He then sprinkles a few drops of water on the ground in front of the door, a simple libation asking the god to keep the land fertile under the harsh sun. The gesture is modest but meaningful, a reminder that even at the busiest time of day, the gods are not forgotten. After a few moments of silent reverence, the noon ritual concludes. The priests bow and depart, leaving the sanctuary closed and quiet as it was. Outside, in the temple courts, it is the hottest part of the day. Activities are minimal now. Some of the older priests take this time to rest in their chambers, perhaps enjoying a short nap on a reed mat while a palm fan stirs the air. Others seek out the shade of a portico and engage in calm pastimes. You might find a trio of priests in a corner, playing a board game of senet. The board is laid out with 30 squares, and they move small carved pieces according to tosses of stick dice, murmuring friendly challenges to one another. Senet is more than just recreation. It's a game imbued with symbolic meaning of the journey to the afterlife. But this afternoon, It also simply brings a bit of leisure and camaraderie. Another priest sits cross-legged not far away, softly strumming a lute or lyre and humming an ancient tune, perhaps a soothing hymn to Hathor, the goddess of music, a gentle entertainment for whoever cares to listen. In the outer courtyard, life in Thebes continues around the temple walls. Townsfolk pass by the great gates, hearing little of the hush within. A few have business at the temple. A small line of locals forms at a side gate, designated for offerings and petitions from ordinary people. Although they cannot enter the sacred halls, common Egyptians aren't entirely shut out from their gods. The temple provides a kind of interface for them. Picture a young farmer waiting nervously with a basket of vegetables, the best of his crop of leeks and onions. When his turn comes, he approaches a priest stationed at the gate. The farmer bows and offers his basket, stammering out a request. His wife is expecting a child, and he prays to the goddess Mut, Amun's divine consort, for a safe delivery. The priest smiles kindly, takes the basket. These vegetables will later supplement the temple kitchens, and in exchange gives the man a small token, perhaps a clay amulet of Toilette, the hippopotamus goddess of childbirth, which has been blessed within the temple. The farmer leaves with relief on his face, believing help is secured. Next in line is an older woman who has walked many miles from a nearby village. She carries a folded piece of papyrus, a letter she wishes to send to the god. If one were to peek, it's actually a petition she paid a local scribe to write for her, describing her ailment and begging the god for healing or guidance. The priest takes the papyrus reverentially. Such written prayers might be placed in a special box or even left in the outer courtyard where, symbolically, Amun can read them at leisure. The woman is told to light a small incense at the public altar just outside the gate, a simple squat stone where anyone can make an offering. She does so, lighting a bit of resin and watching the thin wisp of smoke coil upward in the breeze toward the temple. She whispers a personal prayer under her breath, and in that moment, her eyes well with tears of hope. She will likely spend the night in Thebes and come back tomorrow in case there is an oracle or a sign. Yes, sometimes the god answers directly. On special days, or when the priests deem it suitable, the statue of Amun might be brought out to the forecourt or carried in its bark shrine on the shoulders of priests for an oracle. People can then ask yes or no questions, and the bearers of the shrine will feel a tug or movement, interpreted as the god's answer. One can imagine that a slight sway forward might mean yes, and a dip to the side might mean no, as the priests carrying it subtly communicate the deity's will. But on normal days like this, one must be content with leaving offerings and trusting. Still, even not seeing the god, ordinary people feel his presence around them, in the immense walls, in the faint smell of incense that drifts out occasionally, and in the knowledge that every sunrise the priests are doing their work to keep Amun, and thereby Egypt, satisfied. The afternoon wanes. Golden sunlight slants through the pillars, and the heat softens. Temple work picks up slightly again. The scribes roll up their scrolls for the day. The gardeners finish watering thirsty plants now that the sun is less fierce. Acolytes trim and refill the oil lamps in the darker parts of the temple, so they will be ready to light as dusk falls. And indeed, as the sun sinks lower, painting the western desert hills in amber, the time for the evening service approaches. The priests perform ablutions once more, washing their hands, faces, and feet. They put on fresh linens for the third and last time today. The rhythms of purification are by now second nature, each washing accompanied by a brief prayer, each donning of a robe done with mindfulness. Some of them, are undoubtedly tired, but they carry out their roles with practiced devotion. At sunset, the temple that was bright and sunlit grows dim and mysterious again. The sky turns a deep orange, then red, then purple. The day's activity in the city quiets down. The sounds of merchants and craftsmen fade, replaced by the occasional bark of a dog or cry of a night bird. Within the temple's innermost precinct, the high priest and a small group gather outside the sanctuary doors for the final ritual of the day. The sanctuary has remained sealed since morning, guarding the god in peaceful solitude through the heat of noon and the quiet afternoon. Now that night is imminent, the priests symbolically reassure and guard the god during the dangerous hours of darkness ahead, when, according to Egyptian belief, the sun god fights off the serpent of chaos in the underworld. The high priest lights a special incense known as kapet, or kaifi, in a bronze brazier. Unlike the sharp frankincense of morning or the plain myrrh of noon, kaifi is a rich blend of ingredients: raisins, wine, honey, myrrh, juniper, and more, all compounded into a soothing incense that was traditionally burned at dusk. As the first stars twinkle in the sky overhead, the fragrant smoke of kifi rises, sweet and complex, filling the corridors with a calming haze. The priests chant a gentle evening hymn. One might softly say, "O Amun, the day's labors end. May you rest in contentment as the night embraces the world. We have set Ma'at before you. We have kept Isfet, chaos, at bay. Sleep in peace, great God, until the dawn." Their voices blend with the hum of nighttime insects, now beginning to chirp in the gardens. They do not open the sanctuary. The god has his privacy. Instead, the high priest pours a small libation of water at the threshold and places a fresh lotus flower there. The lotus, which closes at night, symbolizing that even as the flower sleeps, it will reopen at dawn like the sun. A final rattle of the sistrum might be given, its sound now almost like a lullaby in the gloom. In this moment, the huge temple feels again like a quiet, secure home. The sun has vanished beyond the horizon, and a purple-blue darkness gently drapes over the complex. The reliefs on the walls fade into obscurity, and only the flicker of oil lamps carried by the priests casts moving shadows of the columns. With the perfume of kaifi still hanging in the cool night air, the priests take their leave. The high priest casts one more glance at the sealed doors of the sanctuary, silently entrusting the god to the night. Outside in the courts, stars shine brilliantly. Without city lights, the Milky Way itself is a dazzling river above. A priest astronomer climbs a small staircase to the temple roof, as he does every night, to observe those stars and mark the time. The ancient Egyptians are great sky watchers. This priest will note the rising of certain stars, the decans, to keep the calendar and timing of rituals precise. Tonight, he breathes in the kaifi-scented breeze and watches Orion's belt come into view, correlating it with his water clock's readings. His duty helps ensure that dawn rituals will be calibrated to the exact moment of sunrise in days to come. Meanwhile, most of the temple's inhabitants retire. Some priests live on the temple grounds. Others have houses in the city and will walk home through the darkened streets, perhaps with a small lantern in hand. In fact, many priests serve only part of the year, typically 1 month in every 4, and then return to their normal lives and families until their next rotation of duty. So, on this night, a priest may hang up his ceremonial robe, exit the temple precinct, and become once again an ordinary father or husband in his household, until it's time to serve the gods again. The temple gates are closed and secured, with a few watchmen left to patrol the enclosure walls until morning. The great temple of Amun, moments ago the scene of chants and sacred smoke, now lies mostly silent. Only the cicadas and frogs from the riverside beyond compete with the distant jackal calls out in the western desert. In the sanctuary, sealed in perfect darkness, the divine statue stands quietly until dawn, attended by the offerings and the lingering fragrance of the day. One might fancifully imagine that when no humans are around, the gods confer among themselves, or perhaps the carved reliefs on the walls softly whisper myths to each other in the moonlight. But these are just nighttime imaginings. What is certain is that this cycle, wake the god, serve him, and gently bid him good night, will repeat tomorrow and the day after, and so forth, as it has for countless generations. Most days in Thebes follow this cycle, steady as the rising sun. Yet, not every day is ordinary. The quiet routine of temple life can be punctuated by occasions of grand celebration and public joy, the festival days when the gods come out among the people. These were the times most eagerly awaited by common folk and priesthood alike, when all the secrecy and exclusivity of the temple opened up just a little, and the divine presence spilled out into the streets in full color and splendor. Imagine the anticipation building as one of these festival days draws near. Let's step into one now and feel the change in the air. Now it is a few months later in our journey. The Nile flood season has arrived, and with it comes one of the greatest festivals in the ancient Egyptian calendar, the Opet festival in Thebes. The routine of daily temple life gives way to extraordinary preparations. For days, the city has been abuzz. Imagine waking up not to the quiet hush of a regular dawn, but to a festive energy. The river is at its high point, lapping at the docks of Karnak, and the usually restricted avenues of the gods are being decorated for a grand procession. Banners of bright linen stream from poles, and vendors set up stalls near the temple precinct, selling dates, beer, and grilled fish to the gathering crowds. Children dart about, chasing each other with reed dolls or pretending to be priests and pharaohs in play as their parents find a good spot along the processional road. The processional road, a long, straight avenue paved with stones, runs between Karnak Temple, the domain of Amun-Ra, and Luxor Temple, a smaller but significant temple downriver dedicated to Amun's aspect of rejuvenation. Lining this road are sphinx statues in neat rows, guardians that have witnessed many festivals. Today, those sphinxes are draped with flower garlands. The air itself feels different. It's filled with a mix of anticipation, incense, and the faint sweetness of river lotus blooms. From early morning, people from all over Egypt have been arriving by boat, on donkeys, or on foot to join the celebration. Many have traveled for days to be here and pay homage. It's like a grand fair and a pilgrimage rolled into one. For the common folk, this might be the only chance all year, or in many years, to catch a glimpse of the sacred idol of Amun, normally hidden deep in Karnak. Inside Karnak's walls, the priests have been working tirelessly since before dawn. This festival is not just a public spectacle, but a complex religious operation. The statue of Amun, the same one we saw in the sanctuary, has been prepared for travel. Early this morning, in a ceremony attended only by the highest priests and the pharaoh, if he is in Thebes for the occasion, the statue was removed from its shrine and placed in a magnificent boat-shaped shrine called a barque. This barque isn't meant for water alone. It's a portable shrine, a model boat gilded in gold, encrusted with gems, and carrying a small cabin or chapel in its center where the statue rests. Decorated poles for carrying are fitted to its sides. Think of it as a divine palanquin, shaped like a boat. that will be hoisted on the shoulders of priests. The pharaoh himself traditionally participates in opet, as this festival is partly about renewing the divine power of kingship. In our mind's eye, let's place a pharaoh in the scene. Perhaps Pharaoh Ramesses III, or another great new kingdom king, dressed in his most resplendent regalia. He wears the ceremonial kilt with a lion's tail, a broad collar of turquoise and gold gleaming in the sun, and on his head the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt. He has come to Karnak Temple at dawn to perform rites before the procession. Imagine him approaching the barque of Amun in the temple's great courtyard. He offers a bowl of incense and pours a libation of wine and milk in front of the barque to honor the god and invite him on this journey. This close interaction between Pharaoh and the god's image is crucial. It's a reaffirmation that the king is the favored son of Amun. By late morning, the grand procession is ready to set out. Trumpets made of bronze sound a fanfare from the temple gate, a bright brassy blare that sends a thrill through the waiting crowds outside. The massive wooden doors of Karnak swing open, and out comes a line of priests in procession. Leading them are standard bearers holding aloft poles with divine emblems and colorful streamers fluttering. Next come musicians, drummers beating rhythms on skin drums slung over their shoulders, men clashing sistra and manas, which sound like jingling bells and rattles, providing a joyful noise, and trumpeters interjecting piercing notes. The deep thump of an enormous drum carried on a frame keeps a steady heartbeat for the march. Behind them, rows of priestly officials carry smaller statues of associated gods and goddesses, perhaps portable barques bearing images of Mut, Amun's wife, and Khonsu, the moon god, their son, as they too will travel to Luxor Temple as part of the divine family. Each of these is perched on poles and carried by several men. These men, strong and chosen for their endurance, are barefoot and clad in the whitest of linens, perspiring under the weight but holding steady, faces set in expressions of pride and concentration. And then comes the main barque of Amun. It glides forward on the shoulders of a dozen or more priests. The shrine's poles rest on their padded shoulders, and they step in perfect unison to avoid any lurching. The barque itself is a vision, gilded wood shining brilliantly in the sun, fashioned like the solar boat that Amun-Ra takes across the sky. Its prow and stern curve upward elegantly. At the prow is an ornamental ram's head, sacred to Amun, and the entire structure is embellished with lotus motifs and radiating sun discs. Within the little golden cabin in the center, behind silken curtains, sits the hidden statue of Amun. People cannot see the god, but they know he is there, just out of sight, radiating holiness. Flanking the barque are fan bearers with huge ostrich feather fans, gently swaying them to cool and symbolically purify the sacred space around the god. Also, ranked around are the pharaoh's royal guard, dressed in leather cuirasses and kilts, carrying spears and shields. They are there both for ceremony and for crowd control, though on this day, the crowd is exultant and reverent, not unruly. A murmur of awe ripples through the masses as the barque emerges. Many in the crowd prostrate themselves briefly or raise their arms in praise. You can see tears in some eyes, tears of joy at seeing their god come forth after a long year inside. For others, it's the thrill of a festival, a break from toil, and a communion with something truly grand. The pharaoh steps out as well, likely carried in a gilded chariot or walking directly in front of Amun's barque as a sort of honor guard. He might pause at the threshold and dramatically sprinkle sand behind him, a ritual act signifying that he's leaving the temple as a mortal even though inside he acted as a priest, bridging worlds. Outside, he is once again the king among his people, leading the way for the god. Now, the procession starts along the avenue of sphinxes. Imagine the spectacle. The bark of Amun bobbing slightly up and down as the carriers move with a rhythmic step, the golden surfaces catching sunlight and almost blinding to look at. Priests along the sides burn incense in portable censers, so a continuous ribbon of sweet smoke accompanies the god's path. The music is lively. Drums beat in a quick tempo in time with the marching. Sistra shake in complex rhythms. Temple singers, likely both male and female voices, walk alongside chanting hymns to Amun, praising his mercy, his might, describing how he comes to bring blessings to Luxor. Over it all, occasionally the trumpets blare to announce progress. The crowd presses as close as allowed, cheering and crying out praises. Hail Amun, Lord of the thrones of the two lands. Some throw flower petals or wave palm fronds in celebration. A few in the throng might even dare to shout personal pleas, a mother asking for her sick child to be healed, or a farmer praying for good floodwaters. As the bark passes, everyone reaches out their arms in devotion. It's cacophonous yet orderly, a moving theater of devotion. As the procession leaves Karnak's immediate vicinity, it has two possible routes to Luxor: by land along the avenue, or by river on barges. Historically, often the journey included a leg on the Nile. Let's envision that. Reaching a dock near Karnak, the priests carefully lower the bark shrine from their shoulders and slide it onto a great ceremonial boat waiting on the water. This barge is decorated with streamers and garlands of lotuses and papyrus. It's large enough to carry the bark of Amun in the center and is propelled by oarsmen whose oars all dip in unison. The pharaoh either boards his own ornate boat or stands on Amun's barge, humbly fanning the god's shrine. Some art shows the king doing this service himself during Opet. Two smaller barges carry the barks of Mut and Khonsu, so the divine family travels together. Now, the Nile, which usually flows lazily, is alive with craft. Dozens of boats follow the sacred barge. Some are official, bearing more priests or carrying temple furniture and provisions. Others are civilian, filled with people eager to follow along the water route. The river's surface glitters with reflected banners. Picture the scene from the riverbank. The great barge with its shrine gliding by, oars cutting through the water, priests on deck chanting and offering libations to the river as they pass, thanking Hapi, the Nile god, for its flood. Behind them, enthusiastic rowers in simpler boats sing out folk songs and blow horns. The banks are lined with spectators shouting blessings. Women ululate, a high trilling cheer, as the god's boat passes, and men wave palms. It's joyous and communal. In this moment, everyone feels united under Amun's gaze. After a short, downstream journey, it's only about 2 kilometers or so, the flotilla arrives at Luxor Temple. Luxor Temple itself has been prepared to welcome Amun. Think of it as Amun's southern home, or the place of his rejuvenation. The temple is dedicated to the idea of regeneration of kingship and the fertility of the land. In its courtyard stands a tall pair of obelisks and colossal statues of the king, and today, everything is adorned with fresh plants and more garlands. As the bark is brought from the river back onto land, with careful coordination, imagine the straining of priests and assistants as they lift the poles again and find their rhythm after the rocking of the river. The sun is now high overhead, beating down, but the excitement doesn't wane. If anything, the people in Luxor, who have been waiting all morning, roar in greeting when the procession enters the temple forecourt. Inside Luxor Temple's innermost chambers, another ritual will occur, one hidden from public view. The bark of Amun will be carried into the dim sanctuary of Luxor Temple, where, according to belief, Amun of Karnak will meet with or merge with a form of Amun at Luxor, who is sometimes called Amun Emopet, Amun of Opet. In mystical terms, Amun is renewing his own vitality, and by extension, renewing the pharaoh's right to rule. The pharaoh usually enters this sanctuary alone with the priests and the statue. It is said that during Opet, the king undergoes a ritual of rejuvenation, possibly being recrowned or ritually rebirthed before Amun, affirming that he is still the rightful ruler and beloved of the gods. No commoner sees this, but they know it's happening behind those closed doors. They might hear the echoes of chants and the sizzle of incense being burned inside. While these secret rites go on, outside, the populace enjoys the festival atmosphere. The priests and temple staff ensure the crowd stays entertained and fed. Jugs of beer are handed out freely, a state-sponsored gesture of goodwill. And it's not uncommon for festival goers to become a bit tipsy as the day wears on. Food stalls do brisk business, selling grilled meats, bread, and onions. A festival treat for many who maybe don't eat meat often. Dancers perform in the courtyards, acrobatic dancers, and troops of women in flowing white gowns twirling with graceful arm movements to the beat of drums, impersonating celestial goddesses, or perhaps the joyous Hathor herself. The whole gathering becomes a celebration of life and divine blessing. For one day, the barriers between gods and men, king and peasant, feel thinner. Everyone is partaking in a shared sacred story, the renewal of their land and the reaffirmation that the gods love Egypt and dwell among them. As an interesting note, these festival processions sometimes became the stage for divine messages in the public eye. For instance, during the reign of Queen Hatshepsut, one of Egypt's few female pharaohs, Amun's bark was said to have paused deliberately before the queen during Opet, as if the god himself acknowledged and approved her unusual position as king. The priests loudly proclaimed it a divine endorsement. True or not, such incidents show how closely religion and royal authority intertwined in these events, and how attentively people watched the god's movements for signs. As evening approaches, the climax of the public festivities winds down. The pharaoh, looking proud and perhaps a bit weary, emerges from Luxor Temple's inner sanctum. The belief is that he has been spiritually refreshed. Some texts say the Opet festival served to rejuvenate the king, transferring the potency of divinity to him anew. You might see him make a public appearance on the balcony of Luxor Temple. Some temples had an appearance window, where he shows himself to the crowd and perhaps holds up a small image of Mayat or a ceremonial item, signaling that order has been reaffirmed. The crowd cheers wildly at the sight of their king and the implicit message that the gods have approved of him for another year. Finally, as dusk starts to fall, torches are lit to illuminate the path, and the procession reforms to escort Amun back to Karnak. Sometimes the statues would stay in Luxor for a while. Some records indicate the festival lasted 10 or 20 days, where the gods might reside in Luxor Temple for that period. But eventually, there is the return journey, which in itself is another procession, often at night, with oil lamps lighting the way, or a boat trip under the stars. We can imagine one beautiful scene, the bark of Amun being rowed back on the Nile under a sky of deep indigo, lanterns hanging from the boat's rails, casting golden ripples on the black water, and the reflection of those lights dancing alongside the reflection of the moon. The priests chant more solemn, soothing hymns in the night, thanking Amun for joining his children and renewing the world. The people along the banks hold up lamps and torches too, a line of flickering lights greeting the returning god. By the time Amun's bark is carried back through Karnak's gates, it's full night. The statue will be taken carefully back into his sanctuary amid final prayers. Though the crowds aren't allowed that far, they linger outside, singing and celebrating among themselves well into the night. The Opet festival has been a success. The people have seen their god, their king has been revitalized by divine sanction, and there is a hopeful outlook that the Nile will keep flooding right and the harvests will be plentiful. Many in the crowd will camp outside that night or find relatives in the city to stay with, sharing stories of what they witnessed. Did you see the barque sway? I swear I felt the god's power wash over us when he passed. The king looked so radiant. He truly is beloved by Amun. My little one touched a flower that fell from the barque. I'll keep it as a lucky charm. The city falls asleep eventually in a glow of contentment, knowing the gods and king are pleased. Even beyond these annual celebrations, Egyptian pharaohs had other rites of renewal. One was the Grand Sed Festival, typically held after a king had ruled for 30 years. Unlike Opet, which was for Amun and public joy, the Sed Festival was a more private jubilee for the king to rejuvenate his power. The pharaoh would dress in special robes and run a course within a courtyard, ceremonially demonstrating his vitality to the gods and to Egypt. He would kneel, sprint, and dance before statues of the deities, essentially re-coronating himself. These events were rare. Few kings reigned long enough to celebrate one more than once, but they highlight again how deeply ritual was woven into kingship. Whether every year in Opet or once in a generation at a Sed festival, the message was similar. Through ritual, the king and the land were made young and strong again. But Thebes was not the only city with grand celebrations. Not all festivals were solemn or state-focused. In fact, one of the most boisterous celebrations took place in the delta city of Bubastis, in honor of the cat goddess Bastet, a festival famous for its revelry, music, and sheer volume of participants. Let's journey north down the Nile now to see a very different side of Egyptian sacred life, a festival that is equal parts holy pilgrimage and joyous street party, a time when Egyptians from all walks of life let loose in laughter and song. Our travels wouldn't be complete without visiting this very different kind of festival. The city of Bubastis lies on a branch of the Nile in the eastern delta, surrounded by canals and lush marshlands. Bastet's temple here is renowned, not for colossal size, but for its beauty and welcoming atmosphere. Ancient accounts describe it as being set in the center of the city on an island, with a grove of tall trees around it. On festival days, this temple, and indeed the whole city, becomes the beating heart of merriment. It's late summer, during the season of the inundation's peak. Under bright midday skies, flotillas of boats converge on the waterways leading to Bubastis. Each boat is packed with pilgrims, men, women, children, all dressed in their festival best. Women wear flowy white dresses with colorful beadwork. Men sport clean tunics, and many have flower garlands around their heads or necks. From afar, you can hear laughter and the sound of flutes carrying over the water. These boats aren't solemn like Amun's barge. They're lively party barges. On one vessel, a group of women shake sistra, rattles, and clap in rhythm while singing playful songs, their voices carrying over the Nile. On another, men beat little hand drums and tambourines, while someone blows a reed flute. Every so often, boats pull up alongside each other, and playful challenges ensue. maybe a mock insult shouted in good humor, or one boat's passengers tossing an offering of dates onto a friend's boat. It's all in jolly spirit under Bastet's indulgent eye, for she is the goddess of joy, music, dancing, and love, as well as the fierce protector depicted as a lioness when angered. As boats pass by villages on the riverbanks, the revelers shout greetings to the locals watching from shore. The preparations for feasting are immense. At Bubastis Temple, the priests have organized large-scale sacrifices of cattle, geese, and other livestock to feed the throngs. Great plumes of roasting meat smoke rise from the temple precinct as oxen are offered to Bastet and then cooked for the celebrants. This is a day of abundance. No one in Bubastis will go hungry or thirsty while the goddess presides. In fact, one Greek observer, Herodotus, claimed that more wine was consumed during Bastet's festival than in all the rest of the year put together. The locals certainly make good on that statement. By late afternoon, tens of thousands of people have gathered in Bubastis. Some estimates from ancient sources claim this festival drew the largest crowds in Egypt. The city's streets are overflowing with vendors selling grilled fish and duck, jugs of sweet date wine and barley beer, roasted chickpeas, and honey cakes shaped like Bastet's sacred cat. Speaking of cats, they are everywhere, in a very good way. Bubastis is known for its cat population, which is considered blessed by the goddess. Sleek felines lounge on temple walls or wind between the legs of the crowds, purring as people bend down to stroke them or offer tidbits. To harm a cat here, or anywhere in Egypt really, is unthinkable. These creatures are Bastet's living symbols and are afforded the kind of love and care one might give a family member. The Temple of Bastet stands open and inviting. Unlike Amun's sanctuary, parts of Bastet's festivities are more public. In the forecourt of the temple, priests have set up a grand pavilion with musicians playing continuously. Harpists pluck gentle melodies on their bow harps, flutists pipe shrill, cheerful tunes on double pipes, and drummers keep an upbeat tempo on their frame drums. The music of Bubastis is lively. It compels you to tap your feet and sway. And indeed, in the courtyard, dozens of people have formed an impromptu dance circle. Young men and women dance in pairs, twirling and clapping. A group of women perform a graceful dance with arms raised, shaking their sistra in time. They might be priestesses or simply devotees caught up in the spirit. Bastet, as a goddess, is associated with sensual joy, so this is truly her element. One dancer, perhaps a renowned temple entertainer, stands out. She's adorned with a beaded net dress over a flowing linen gown, and as she moves, her collar of bronze bells jingles softly. The crowd encourages her with cheers as she executes an especially elegant spin, arms outstretched like a cat stretching luxuriously in the sun. Inside the temple's inner rooms, where only priests go, formal rituals to honor Bastet are taking place, likely including offerings of fragrant oils, the burning of myrrh, and the recitation of praise poems to the goddess. Bastet's image might be that of a woman with a cat's head, often shown holding a sistrum. During the festival, the statue may be brought out to a shrine in the outer courtyard so all can see the goddess, or at least see her gilded image within its carrying shrine. When that moment happens, the appearance of Bastet's barque or palanquin, a delighted cheer erupts. Unlike Amun's veiled mystery, Bastet's charisma is accessible and friendly. Some in the crowd toss lotus flowers or even catnip toward the palanquin in playful tribute. The goddess's sacred cats doubtless enjoy that offering. The priests carry her image around the courtyard for all to honor, and mothers lift their children up on their shoulders so they can wave at Lady Bastet. The atmosphere is one of affectionate devotion, more like greeting a beloved friend than a distant monarch of the cosmos. And then the wine flows. Oh, how it flows. Bubastis festival is famed for the consumption of wine and beer, red wine by the jugful. The delta is closer to Egypt's wine-producing regions, and for this occasion, the vintners have been generous. Huge clay amphorae are set up on stands, with little pottery cups for anyone to fill. You see groups of friends raising toasts. To Bastet, to life, they cry, their cheeks flushed with drink and happiness. Strangers link arms and dance, forming momentary friendships in their revelry. A middle-aged man proudly boasts, a bit loudly after his third cup, that he walked all the way from Memphis for this festival, and by the gods, it was worth it. A grandmother is telling a cluster of teenagers some legendary tale of Bastet's cleverness. Perhaps a story of how Bastet saved a village from snakes by sending her sacred cats to hunt them. And the youths listen, eyes shining, while politely refilling her cup. Everywhere you look, people are smiling or laughing. Any worries of daily life are, for this day, completely forgotten. As twilight descends, the energy doesn't wane. It shifts into a dreamy, magical gear under flickering torchlight. The temple precinct and city squares are illuminated by hundreds of oil lamps. In the main city plaza near Bastet's temple, a bonfire is lit. Around it, people gather for the climax of the festivity, communal singing. One charismatic fellow, perhaps a bard or just a particularly lively local, starts an old festival song, belting out a lyric that everyone knows by heart. It's a call and response tune. He calls, "Hail Bastet, Lady of Love," and the crowd sings back, "Lady of Music and Joy." He continues, improvising witty lines praising Bastet's grace and her mighty protection, and after each line the crowd roars in enthusiastic response. Laughter breaks out when he inserts a playful tease or local inside joke into the lyrics. Children dance clumsily near the fire while their parents clap in rhythm. It feels like the entire city is one big family in these moments, all under Bastet's playful, benevolent gaze. The intoxicating mix of wine, music, and the sense of freedom makes the night feel almost enchanted. Many speak of feeling touched by Bastet's spirit, a warm, feline presence that loosens their worries and brings out their laughter. Even those who don't drink find themselves swept up in the collective giddiness. You might see a normally stern craftsman break into a dance with his wife, or a shy young girl giggle as an older lady teaches her a new drum beat on a tambourine. Bastet's celebration dissolves barriers. Social status, age, and gender lines blur in the shared merriment. As the celebration eventually winds down in the late hours, the city of Bubastis lies under a gentle haze, both a literal haze of cookfire smoke and a figurative haze of contentment. Many will camp outside or sleep on their boats, too tired or inebriated to travel home until morning. Stray cats curl up beside slumbering revelers as if standing guard for the goddess. In the temple, the priests quietly carry Bastet's statue back to her inner sanctum, perhaps leaving a particularly generous bowl of beer and a platter of roasted fish as offerings, a final treat for the goddess to enjoy overnight. The legacy of this festival is found in the stories and smiles that will linger long after. People will return to their villages and towns telling how wonderful it was. We danced all night in Bastet's shadow. I met a fellow from the next nome, province, and we laughed until we cried. The goddess blessed me. I just know it. I feel renewed. And next year, they'll come again, as long as health and fortune allow. In celebrating Bastet, they celebrated the pure joy of being alive, something the Egyptians, for all their meticulous preparations for eternity, never took for granted in the here and now. Our journey through Egyptian rituals wouldn't be complete without touching on a festival that is more mystical and solemn, yet deeply comforting, the beautiful Feast of the Valley in Thebes. This festival has a different mood. It's held to honor the dead and reunite with departed loved ones, a kind of Memorial Day meets joyful family reunion under the gaze of Amun. It takes place on the west bank of the Nile, where the sun sets and where the Egyptians buried their dead. The focus is on remembrance, gratitude, and the affirmation of eternal life. The sun is just beginning to dip toward the western horizon, bathing Thebes in a golden glow. Instead of gathering at Karnak's eastern temple alone, people stream across the Nile to the western bank, the land of the setting sun, symbolic land of the dead. Families carry baskets of food and jugs of beer or wine. Many also bring bunches of flowers, especially lotuses and daisies, and small lanterns. The beautiful Feast of the Valley is essentially Amun's yearly visit to the west, to the realm of the deceased, to allow the living to commune with the souls of their ancestors. The festival has been celebrated since the Middle Kingdom, when it was just Amun on a solitary journey. By the New Kingdom, it became a major event in Thebes. At the great temple of Hatshepsut at Deir el-Bahri, one of Amun's important West Bank temples, priests and locals have been busy preparing since midday. The pharaoh himself often partook in this festival as well, crossing the Nile to join the procession. For the king, it was an opportunity to honor his ancestors buried in these western hills. He might lead a special offering ceremony at a royal tomb or a mortuary temple, paying respects to bygone pharaohs while Amun visits the realm of the dead. This gesture reinforced that the living ruler remembered and revered the departed, further knitting together past and present under the god's gaze. Meanwhile, the common citizens focus on their own ancestors. Many families have cleaned and swept out their family tombs in the days ahead of the festival, and now they decorate these tomb chapels with fresh flowers and set out small feasts in honor of their forebears. As twilight approaches, a hush falls over the western necropolis. The normally still desert hills, dotted with dark tomb entrances and grand mortuary temples, begin to flicker with light. Each family lights clay lamps or candles at their ancestors' tombs. If you were hovering above Thebes, you'd see the West Bank transform into a mirror of the night sky. Hundreds, then thousands of little flames glowing among the cliffs and monuments. It's often called the Feast of Lanterns for this reason. The effect is both eerie and beautiful. The city of the dead is aglow, as if the souls themselves are shining. From the direction of the river comes the sound of chanting and the faint blare of a horn. Here comes Amun's barque, crossing the Nile at sunset. Priests ferry the sacred boat, much like during Opet, across the waters. But this procession is quieter, more reverent. Many in the West Bank crowd kneel as the barque is carried off the boat and brought up the dusty path to Hatshepsut's temple. At this moment, families stand up from their tomb vigils and gather along the route, lamps in hand. Imagine the sight: a line of priests with torches leading the way, the golden barque of Amun carried by strong shoulders, its gleaming surfaces reflecting the pinpoints of lamplight around. The sun has just set. The sky is a deep indigo with a faint afterglow on the horizon, and Amun arrives to the land of the dead. As the barque enters the great court of the temple of Deir el-Bahri, which is built in terraces against the cliff, it is greeted by a chorus of women's voices. The wailing women, priestesses playing the roles of Isis and Nephthys perhaps, keening in stylized mourning for all who have died. But these are not despairing wails so much as ceremonial cries, reminding everyone that even the gods have mourned and overcome loss. The statue of Amun is taken to a special shrine within the temple that represents the underworld abode of the ancestors. There, the high priest performs rituals of offering and invocation. Bowls of cool water, incense, and bread and meat are presented not just to Amun, but to the Akus, the blessed dead of Thebes. It is believed that Amun on this day carries the offerings directly to the spirits, nourishing them and reaffirming their right to partake in the bounty of the earth. Outside on the temple terraces, the people participate in their own heartfelt ways. They treat this night as an intimate picnic with their departed family members. Just outside tomb entrances, or in the courtyard of the temple, families lay out mats and bring forth the food they've prepared. You see groups sitting in circles by lamplight. They pour libations on the ground. A father trickles beer onto the sand, saying, "For you, grandfather, drink with us." They set aside portions of dinner, a slice of bread, a cut of fish, on small offering plates for the unseen guests among them. Children, initially a little spooked by the dark tombs, soon giggle as elders tell funny anecdotes about the deceased. Remember how uncle always spilled his wine. Chuckles all around. There are tears, too. One young woman quietly slips away from her family's mat to kneel by her mother's tomb niche, speaking softly to her mother's spirit about how much she misses her. She leaves a garland of blue lotuses, her mother's favorite flower, and the scent of them mixes with a tear she lets fall on the stone. Up at the temple, the formal ceremony concludes with a moving finale. The priests present Amun with two small effigies made of earth and seeds, one of Osiris and one of Amun himself. These Osiris gardens, as they are called, are little figurines planted with sprouting grain. After days in the dark, water and seeds yield bright green shoots on the figurine's surface, symbolizing resurrection. Tonight, these effigies, one representing the dead, Osiris, and one the living divine presence, Amun, are paraded out to the temple steps and shown to the public. A hush goes through the crowd, followed by sighs of admiration. The message is clear. From death, life springs. The dead are not gone, but merely awaiting rebirth. Families clutch each other's hands. Some smile through tears, finding comfort in this tangible symbol of renewal. The high priest then calls out over the quiet crowd, "O people of Thebes, your ancestors live in the light of the west. They join you this night in rejoicing, so let there be no sadness, only celebration, until the god returns east." With that, the mood lifts. This is the cue for families to start a gentle celebration of their own. Some bring out sistra and hand drums to accompany soft hymns. At various points in the necropolis, you hear pockets of song, perhaps a lullaby a grandmother sings, which her own mother sang for her, and so on, or a simple hymn, "O beautiful West, grant our loved ones to live forever in peace." The voices echo off the cliffs, mingling with the flicker of 1,000 lamps like stars brought to earth. Many families choose to spend the whole night by the tombs of their loved ones. It's dry and warm, and there is profound comfort in sleeping where one's ancestors lie, especially on this night of divine grace. Imagine lying on your back on a mat, your head pillowed on a folded cloak, looking up at the endless stars. Around you, other families are curled up together, some tending a small bonfire, others already asleep in each other's arms. A little boy, fighting sleep, asks his father whether Grandpa will visit him in a dream tonight. The father pats his head and says, "Perhaps. Keep your heart open." Not far away, an elderly couple sits side by side against a tomb wall, quietly reminiscing about the son they lost years ago, believing he hears them tonight. There is sorrow, yes, but it's a gentle sorrow, buffered by hope and togetherness. The presence of the god, resting in the temple overnight, reassures them that their prayers and messages will indeed reach their beloved deceased. Come dawn, the festival concludes. As the eastern sky begins to brighten behind the cliffs, Amun's priests ready the barque to journey back to Karnak. Families, bleary-eyed but spiritually uplifted, pack up their baskets and extinguish their lamps. Some whisper final goodbyes at tomb doors. Sleep well until next year, believing that for one night truly the veil between worlds was lifted. The barque of Amun sails back across the river in the early morning light, and with it, perhaps many of the visiting spirits return to the west. The living return to their eastern homes, comforted that the bond with their ancestors is as strong as ever, and that the gods watch over both the living and the dead with equal love. Between the boisterous public jubilation of Opet, the tender familial gathering of the Valley Festival, and the exuberant revelry of Bastet's feast, we see how Egyptian festivals could vary greatly in tone and purpose, yet all shared an underlying goal, reinforcing Ma'at, the sense of cosmic and social harmony. In Opet, it was the entire nation and its king's divine mandate that were renewed. In the Valley Feast, it was the unity of living and dead in the grand cycle of existence. In Bastet's celebration, it was the simple but profound joy of life and community that was honored. Each in its way left participants with reassurance. The world was in order, the gods were content, and the people of Egypt, whether mourning, working, or celebrating, were embraced by the divine. The traditions we've explored, from the hushed dawn rituals to raucous festivals, endured for astonishing lengths of time. To truly appreciate their longevity, consider that an Egyptian of one era might barely recognize the world of another, yet the temple ceremonies remained a constant thread. Let's take a little imaginative leap through time to witness how these rituals weathered change and nearly faltered only to rise again. Picture Thebes around 1350 BCE during the reign of Pharaoh Akhenaten. The sun beats down on nearly abandoned courtyards of Karnak. Yes, abandoned, for Akhenaten has declared that only one god, the Aten, the sun disk, shall be worshipped. He closed the temples of Amun and others, redirecting worship to new open-air shrines dedicated to Aten. The grand temple of Amun that we walked through in our journey fell silent. The daily rites we observed stopped cold. No dawn breaking of the seal, no incense curling toward the ceiling, no festival processions. The sanctuary doors stayed shut, dust gathered on the floor unswept. A few loyal priests of Amun, perhaps, tended secretly to a statue hidden away, but officially, Thebes became a city without its gods. Imagine how the populace felt, confused, fearful. Some likely performed small private rituals at home, whispering prayers to Amun or Mut in secret, yearning for the familiar comfort of the old ceremonies. It was as if the sun rose every day without officially being greeted. An unsettling break in Ma'at, the cosmic order. Akhenaten moved the royal court to a new city, Akhetaten, modern Amarna, and for about 20 years, the old festivals and temple services across Egypt were suspended, but traditions that deep have a way of surviving. After Akhenaten's death, his successors, including the young Tutankhamun, restored the old worship with fervor. Now picture Thebes a few decades later. The temple gates are flung open again, priests and laypeople streaming in with relief and elation. Amun's statue is brought out of storage or crafted anew, sanctified, and returned to his shrine. The morning after that restoration, you can almost sense how joyous the dawn must have been. The high priest breaking the seal and calling, "Awaken in peace, great God," after years of forced silence. The people believed that Egypt's heart started beating properly again that day. The festivals resumed. You can bet the first Opet following those heresy years was an especially emotional one, with people openly weeping and cheering as the barque of Amun paraded through the streets, as if to say, "Our God is back among us, and all is well with the world." This episode shows how central temple ceremonies were to Egyptian life. Even a powerful pharaoh couldn't erase them for long. Fast forward now to 332 BCE. Alexander the Great marches into Egypt, ending the era of native pharaohs. Though a conqueror, one of Alexander's first acts is to travel deep into the western desert to the Siwa oasis and consult the oracle of Amun, where he is pronounced a son of the god. Why would a Macedonian warlord care about that? Because he understood the authority these traditions held. By being acknowledged through an Egyptian temple ritual, Alexander tapped into 2,000 years of religious legitimacy. After Alexander, his general Ptolemy and the dynasty that followed, the Ptolemies, ruled as new pharaohs. They were Greek by blood, speaking Greek at court, but in Egyptian eyes they had to act like pharaohs, which meant participating in temple ceremonies, building new temples, and honoring the gods in the traditional ways. Imagine visiting Dendera Temple around 50 BCE, during the reign of Queen Cleopatra VII, the famous Cleopatra. The temple is brand new, built in traditional Egyptian style with massive stone columns covered in hieroglyphs and heavenly scenes. Cleopatra's likeness is carved on the outer walls, portrayed as a pharaoh making offerings to Hathor, the cow-eared goddess of love and joy. By Cleopatra's time, these rituals are as ancient to her as she is to us now, roughly 3,000 years of continuity, yet she upholds them devoutly. At Dendera, Cleopatra, who embraced her role as a divine ruler in Egyptian eyes, identifying with the goddess Isis, likely participated in the daily rite or special festivals. You can picture her in a fine linen dress and the vulture crown of a great queen, shaking the sistrum in Hathor's honor, pouring milk libations and offering incense just as any pharaoh would. By doing so, she wasn't merely putting on a show. She was reinforcing her legitimacy and the bond between Egypt's people and their deities. The common folk of her time probably took comfort that Cleopatra revered the gods just as the mighty kings of old did. Indeed, one inscription at Dendera grandly titles her "Beloved of Hathor, who causes the rites to live." Ptolemaic kings and queens built some of the most spectacular temples whose remains we see today, Edfu, Dendera, Philae, complete with detailed ritual texts carved in stone, a sign that they wanted these practices literally etched into permanence. The daily ritual we followed, for example, is preserved on temple walls in the Ptolemaic period, confirming that even in the era of Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, Egyptian priests were still waking the gods at dawn and putting them to bed at night in the age-old fashion. The Ptolemaic dynasty even introduced a new deity, Serapis, a fusion of the Egyptian Osiris-Apis bull and aspects of Greek Zeus and Hades, hoping to unify Greek and Egyptian worshippers under one cult. They built grand serapeums, temples of Serapis, in cities like Alexandria, blending traditions. But tellingly, they still depicted themselves as pharaohs with the traditional crowns and ritual poses, making sure to honor the ancient forms, with just a few stylistic tweaks reflecting their Hellenistic flair. The core practices and beliefs, and the presentation of the king and the gods, changed very little overall. The old temple rites remained the cultural and spiritual center of society, from the earliest pharaonic times right through to the 4th century CE. Of course, time did bring change. After Cleopatra's death in 30 BCE, Egypt came under Roman rule. The Romans, too, respected the antiquity of Egypt's religion, at least initially. Emperors like Augustus portrayed themselves in temple carvings performing offerings to Egyptian gods to legitimize their reign. But gradually, as centuries passed, new faiths rose. By the 4th century CE, Christianity had spread widely in Egypt, and the Roman emperors issued edicts against pagan worship. Temple incomes dwindled as imperial support waned, and converts stopped endowing them. One by one, the great sanctuaries closed their doors. The last known hieroglyphic inscription, dated to 394 CE in the Temple of Isis at Philae, is essentially the swan song of the old religion. Let's linger on that poignant moment. It's around 450 CE in the far south of Egypt, at Philae Island in the Nile, a holy site dedicated to the goddess Isis, wife of Osiris. The world has changed. Much of the Roman Empire is Christian now, and Egyptian temples everywhere have been officially shut down, their priests gone or in hiding. But at Philae, a small group of devoted priests has held on, performing the rituals in secret for as long as possible. Imagine an aging priest of Isis, perhaps one of the last. It's before dawn, and he stands alone in the innermost sanctuary of the Isis temple. The walls around him are carved with scenes of Isis nursing her infant son, Horus, scenes that mirror Mary and Jesus imagery that is by now spreading in Egypt. The priest's hands tremble around the little oil lamp he holds. By its light, you see his face, lined with worry, but also serene with faith. He has done this every morning for decades, through tumultuous times. The sanctuary still has the statue of Isis in place, draped in fine cloth, though the jewels once adorning it have been stripped by authorities. No matter. He proceeds. In a quavering voice, he greets the goddess. "Awaken peace, O Isis, great enchantress, mother of God. Awake in peace." Perhaps he is the only one saying these words in all of Egypt now. He carefully lights incense. Maybe all he has is some local frankincense resin gifted by sympathetic villagers. He goes through the motions, opening the shrine doors, cleansing the statue, offering a cake of bread and a cup of water. Wine is scarce now. As he does each action, he recites the prayers. Some he had to copy furtively from old papyrus scrolls before the library was confiscated. Others he memorized from his grandfather, who was also a priest here. This priest's eyes well up with tears at certain lines, knowing he might be the last to speak them. Still, in that quiet pre-dawn hour, as the eastern sky hints at light, he feels the presence of Isis as strongly as ever. Perhaps stronger, because the world outside has grown cold to her. In this small dark room, for a few moments more, the divine flame still lives. By sunup, a messenger arrives with an imperial decree. The temple must close. The priesthood is to disband. The details are lost to history, but we know that soon after, Philae's temple was indeed shuttered, its statues likely taken away or destroyed, its halls eventually turned into a Christian chapel. One can imagine that old priest carving a brief hieroglyphic message on the wall, maybe just a line recording the date of the last ritual, and then locking the sanctuary one final time. Perhaps he took the statue of Isis and hid it in the river, or perhaps he joined a monastery bringing some of Isis's symbols secretly. Legend has it that some Isis devotees transferred their love to the Virgin Mary. seeing her as a successor to the motherly goddess. Thus, after more than 3 millennia, the daily temple ceremonies quietly came to an end. The mighty voices that greeted the dawn fell silent. The towering columns and painted ceilings were left to the mercies of dust and time. But incredibly, that was not truly the end of the story. The legacy of those rituals lived on in various ways. Many Egyptians had already internalized the idea of caring for a divine presence daily. One can argue that the reverence and ceremony found new homes in Coptic Christian liturgies, which to this day involve incense, chants, processions, and bread and wine offerings not entirely unlike those ancient patterns. The very Egyptian instinct to seek ma'at, to do what is right and balanced, merged into new religious ethics, and the temples themselves, even as ruins, continued to inspire awe. Locals might forget the exact rites, but they remembered something holy was here. They told stories about the spirits of the old gods, sometimes identifying them with Muslim saints or mysterious jinn. Nothing so profound ever vanishes without a trace. Standing today amid the colossal ruins of Karnak or Luxor at sunrise, one can almost feel a resonance of those ancient prayers. The columns might be broken in places, the roofs open to the sky, but the birds still wheel and cry as they did in the priest's time, and the first rays of the sun still paint the temple stones gold. It takes little imagination to picture a white-robed figure hurrying along the fallen blocks, carrying a censer, ready to awaken the god one more time. That timeless atmosphere is perhaps the greatest legacy of the Egyptian temple ceremonies. They instilled in these places a sacredness that lingers, a memory in stone and silence that still has the power to move us. Before we end, there's one more fascinating aspect of Egyptian temple life to consider: the reverence for living sacred animals. We've seen gods in statues and heard their stories, but Egyptians also believed that certain individual animals were incarnations of divine power. The most celebrated example was the Apis bull of Memphis. Memphis, Egypt's ancient capital in the north, housed the Temple of Ptah. Here lived Apis, a real flesh and blood bull identified by specific sacred markings. Legend said he had a white diamond on his forehead and other distinct patterns on his hide. The Egyptians believed this bull was a manifestation of Ptah's creative force, and later associated with Osiris as well, as Osiris Apis or Serapis. Imagine walking into the Apis house at the Memphis Temple complex. It's not the hush of a dark sanctuary that greets you, but a spacious courtyard filled with sunlight and the earthy scent of fresh hay. In the center, strolling calmly, is a magnificent black bull with a white blaze on its brow. He's enormous, truly an impressive animal, yet he moves with a gentle dignity. Priests attend him much like they attend a god statue, except this deity munches on clover and occasionally flicks his tail. Visitors, from humble farmers to high officials, come to pay respects to Apis. A family might approach the railing and bow as the bull passes, whispering a prayer for fertility or strength, or a personal wish. The bull's every movement is watched for omens. If he takes food from someone's hand, it's considered a sign of divine favor. If he thunders suddenly or refuses to emerge from his stall one morning, some might worry it portends bad times. The priests keep the Apis bull's living quarters impeccably clean and adorned with flowers. On festival days for Ptah or other special occasions, Apis is led in procession through Memphis, adorned with a sun disk between his horns and a cloak of gold sequined cloth over his back. People cheer and scatter petals in his path, much as they would for a pharaoh, because in their eyes, he is a god walking among them. When an Apis bull died, which was a momentous event. Bulls live maybe 14 or 15 years typically. All of Egypt went into mourning as if a king had died. The bull's body was embalmed with the same meticulous care as a human mummy and transported along a ceremonial avenue to its burial place in the desert. At Saqqara, the Serapeum catacombs were where generations of Apis bulls were entombed. These tombs were enormous granite sarcophagi, big enough to hold a bull, astonishing to see even now. Priests and grieving citizens would hold funerary rituals. Some accounts say people shaved their eyebrows in grief, since harming hair was a sign of mourning, and fittingly, cats were mourned by shaving eyebrows. That's Bastet's influence, but similar fervor was shown for Apis. But importantly, the death of one Apis was not an end. It was a transition. The priests immediately searched for the new Apis calf, a young bull born at that moment with the requisite white marks. When they found him, a great cheer spread. The Apis had been reborn. The new bull would be transported to Memphis with celebration, nursed and raised with devotion, and the cycle continued for centuries. In this, the Egyptians saw proof that life wins over death, a comforting theme consistent with their Osiris myth. Apis was the most famous, but not the only holy creature. In Hermopolis, Ashmounein, ibises and baboons were sacred to Thoth, the scribe god. Temples there kept ponds full of sacred ibises and even a few tame baboons that participated in sunrise rituals. Baboons famously bark at sunrise, which Egyptians took as them greeting the sun. At Crocodilopolis, in the Fayum region, a crocodile called Petsuchos was worshipped as an embodiment of the crocodile god Sobek. He lived in a special pool, well fed with raw meat and cake by priests, and adorned with jewels and trinkets, golden bracelets on its forepaws, believe it or not. When the old crocodile died, the priests simply welcomed another from the Nile canals, proclaiming Sobek had taken a new form. Likewise, at the city of Heliopolis, Mnevis the black bull was revered as a living image of the sun god Ra. In Thebes, certain rams were considered incarnations of Amun. And of course, at Bubastis, as we've seen, cats were cherished as Bastet's avatars. Each of these animals lived a pampered, priestly life, and upon death received lavish burials. For example, many of the ibises sacred to Thoth were mummified and placed in dedicated catacombs by the millions. Pilgrims would donate a mummified ibis as a pious gift to the god. Likewise, cats, falcons, jackals, and even scarab beetles were bred, sacrificed humanely, and mummified as offerings in different locales. Modern archaeologists uncover vast galleries filled floor to ceiling with animal mummies. A somewhat startling sight for us, but a touching one too, once you understand what it meant. Each mummy was a token of devotion from an ordinary person, a prayer made tangible. For Bastet, in thanks for healing my child, might be the silent wish behind one of those little cat bundles. From one perspective, these practices provided tangible, living bridges to the divine for ordinary people. Not everyone could enter a dark sanctuary or hope to meet the king, but anyone might catch sight of the Apis bull parading by or cuddle a cat at Bastet's temple and feel the presence of a caring god. To feed the holy crocodile or tend the temple cats was in itself a sacred service, no less important than reciting a spell. It was all one continuum of reverence for life, a celebration of creation in all its forms. Perhaps after hearing of the lavish care given to the Apis bull or the gentle purring cats in Bastet's courtyard, we can appreciate how deeply the Egyptians saw the divine in the world around them, in every creature that crawls or soars, in every dawn and dusk. Their temple ceremonies, whether grand or humble, were ultimately about honoring the cosmos they lived in and finding the sacred in every aspect of existence. Through this long journey, we've peered into the spiritual heart of ancient Egypt. We walked in dawn's first light alongside white-robed priests, feeling the cool stones underfoot and smelling that sweet incense as a god awoke to a new day. We joined joyous crowds under the sun, cheering as golden barques glided by and the music of trumpets and rattling sistra filled the air. We stood on the west bank at night, lamp in hand, calling out greetings to souls long gone but never forgotten. We sailed down the Nile with laughter in our ears and danced until our feet ached in honor of a feline goddess. We witnessed solemn dramas in desert sands where gods died and were reborn, and felt the quiet awe of life's triumph over death. We met the divine in many forms, as statues hidden in sanctuaries, as mighty bulls striding among devotees, as humble house cats and fearsome crocodiles as the radiant sun and the silent stars. And through it all, we saw how the Egyptians found ways to bring the gods into every corner of their world. It's striking, isn't it, how across time and culture, people seek similar comforts and truths. The ancient Egyptians, with all their elaborate rites and vibrant festivals, were ultimately expressing human hopes we still recognize. They wanted each sunrise to bring renewal and security. They found meaning and joy in gathering together to celebrate. They sought reassurance that departed loved ones remained part of the family. They trusted that some higher power kept the universe in balance. They used different symbols and stories to express these hopes, but the feelings are familiar. Who hasn't felt the quiet peace of a morning routine, or the uplift of a holiday gathering, or needed to mourn and remember and find hope again? The details change. We might light a birthday candle instead of an oil lamp for Ra, or sing soothing lullabies instead of temple hymns. But the impulse is the same, to connect with something greater than ourselves and to find comfort and wonder in that connection. As you lie here now, perhaps with the lights low and the world quiet around you, you can almost imagine the glow of those old lamps and torches in your mind's eye. Picture the temple of your own room as a sacred, serene space. The soft hum of your fan or the distant night noises outside could be like the hush of the Nile's breeze through temple courtyards, a natural lullaby. If you catch a gentle scent, maybe a lingering hint of soap or a nearby candle, let it remind you of the faint sweetness of kaifi incense lulling the temples at dusk. Take a deep breath and feel the calm of this moment. In a way, your bedtime rituals, fluffing your pillow, pulling up the blanket just so, listening to a soothing voice, are not so different from a gentle ritual to close out the day with order and peace. It's your personal offering to the night, asking for safe passage through darkness until the morning light returns. So, as our journey through ancient Egyptian temples and ceremonies comes to a close, carry with you that enduring sense of calm and continuity. The world those priests and pilgrims inhabited may be long past, but their hopes and their search for comfort in ritual are part of our shared human story. We've lit lamps with them at dusk and welcomed the dawn by their side. Now it's time for us to embrace the night and the lovely dreams it may bring. Thank you for accompanying me on this long and winding Nile adventure through time. It's been truly special to share these stories with you, and I hope you feel a bit of the wonder and tranquility that I do. Until our next journey together, sleep well and sweet dreams. May the stars of Nut, the sky goddess, watch over you tonight. Sleep well, and until our next adventure, Deginum Hotep, go in peace. Thank you for listening, everyone. Take care. Good night and pleasant dreams.